The 647th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Cardinals win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you on a Sunday afternoon, here to recap Carolina's 84-78 loss to California yesterday afternoon/evening as the Heels go 0-2 on the West Coast. They fall to 14-4 on the season. They're now 2-3 in ACC play. They fall to 3-4 in Quad 1 games this year and 17-36 in Quad 1 games under Hubert Davis, whose job is, I think now it's safe to say, it's firmly on the line. The pressure is on. The heat is on after, just an inexcusable road trip where Carolina got swept by two teams that, quite frankly, should not have beaten Carolina. But that's not the reality of the situation. The reality is that Carolina got beat, and we've got to dissect another loss and talk about it. Carolina trailed 54-37 at the half. They trailed by 19 with 8:24 left to play before a ferocious comeback cut it to 6 with 2.5 minutes to go, cut it to 4 with 1:24 to go. But ultimately, they could not get the job done. And as you could expect, Cal had a great shooting performance. They shot 50% from the field. They shot 54% from three on 14 makes. So the three-point barrage against Carolina continues. And on a night where Caleb Wilson was once again Carolina's best player, he scores 17 points, goes 6 of 12 shooting, but only one shot attempt across the final 10 minutes and 19 seconds. And that was a desperate, three-point shot in the final seconds. That was the only registered shot attempt he had over the final 10-19. And that was after having just 2 shot attempts by the under 12 timeout of the first half. So another night where Caleb Wilson was still dominant, but not featured nowhere near as much as he should have been in the offense. And all in all, it equals another frustrating loss, another disturbing loss. And if you thought, the tone of this podcast was overreactionary on Thursday when we recap the Stanford loss, you might want to buckle in for this one because yesterday's loss in a lot more ways was worse than the loss you had to Stanford earlier in the week. Cal was 13-5 entering the game. They were 1-4 in ACC competition, and quite simply, from start to finish, they were the better team. They were the better coach team, and that should not be something we'll be saying when we're talking about North Carolina basketball and California basketball.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the worst losses we've ever seen under Hubert Davis. A game where you were just absolutely dominated the entire time. There was never a moment where you felt like Carolina was going to win this game, and it started with poor effort on the defensive end of the floor yet again. Carolina was just absolutely terrible in the first half of this game, allowed 54 points in the first half. That's not going to win you any games. And then, the more concerning thing was, at the start of the game, Carolina can't rebound. You let up offensive rebounds, allow them to really get in a rhythm on that end of the floor. And then from there, then the same issues that you were dealing with for the last handful of games really started to show up again. You allow 10 first half threes to California. That's just not a recipe for any sort of success, no matter who you're playing, but especially when you're playing a team like Cal in their gym. It's just to get to the point that we're at already is unbelievable. I thought it would take at least towards the middle of conference play, even in the worst scenario that I imagined, before you would really start talking about Carolina, moving on from Hubert Davis at the end of the season, mainly because I did not think that losses to Stanford and Cal were really on the table. Now, part of that is that Stanford and Cal are much better than I think some people believed that they were going to be coming into the season, but it still doesn't excuse it. As you talked about, this Cal team was 1-4 in conference. They were good in the non-conference because they really didn't play anybody. But this is not a team that should be controlling the game against you, should be up by 20 at one point during this game. That's just ridiculous. So it's not the end of the end of the season. There's still plenty of time for Carolina to get it turned around. But the problem is that how much belief does anybody really have that this group is going to be able to turn things back in the right direction? Because we thought after the game against SMU, that would be the wake-up call. We thought, okay, maybe a game against Wake Forest where you got a little bit of a scare, but you were able to hold on. Maybe that would be the wake-up call. And then we thought Stanford getting, allowing 95 points to them, getting beat in a game that you should have won based off of how you played offensively, and you're allowing 16 threes. It might finally click for this group, but it just doesn't feel like it's setting home with these guys. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's really all focused on Hubert Davis, if it's on these guys for being stubborn. I don't know what it is, but it certainly is not what we imagined coming into this year.
Well, the worst part is you look at some of these losses, they're not aging well. You look at the SMU loss. Since they did what they did to Carolina, they had to have a buzzer beater to beat Virginia Tech at home. And then yesterday they lose at home to a Virginia team that's emerged as the second best team in the conference. That Stanford team that scored 95 points and shot, was it 56% from the field on Wednesday night, scored 50 against Duke and lost by 30. So it's which is what that shows to you is that this is a Carolina issue. As much as we can sit here and people can say these are teams playing in over their head, we had to listen to the first handful of the game yesterday because Boston College, Syracuse went to overtime, and for whatever reason, ESPN cannot get games available up on the app in a timely manner. Like Jones Angels talk about, well, they're making threes because they're playing Carolina. No, we can get rid of that. People are making threes because Carolina can't defend. Carolina doesn't want to defend. And look, Hubert Davis made some adjustments. I think you got to give him credit for that. He finally did, put Derek Dixon in the starting lineup. Only played Kyan Evans 10 minutes. Here was the problem. At the first dead ball, first TV timeout, he took Derek Dixon off the floor and put Kyan Evans in the game. Why? There's no reason to justify that decision. Then in that sequence, Kyan Evans commits one of the worst turnovers. Quite simply, he is committed all year, where he was going to hand the ball off, I believe, to Caleb Wilson, and just handed the ball right to the defender. We go to a stoppage. We come back from the timeout. Who's still on the floor? Kyan Evans. It's a lack of accountability that starts with the head coach who, in his mind, claims that he holds people accountable, but does not do so with the guys that he should hold the most accountable. You finally see a 2-3 zone, something we have been begging for and parading around, that you've got to just give a different look defensively. Hubert said in his post-game press conference he thought that they did a really good job, and that was California making shots. And it's just, I don't know what the disconnect is. I don't know where there's a lack of correlation between what Hubert Davis is watching and what I'm watching as a fan. Because quite simply, too many times, they were too far away from shooters. Henry Vassar was playing too far back in the zone. The ball got to where you always got to say the ball's got to get to, and Cal was able to attack. Cal was able to score over and over and over again. But you still, through all of that, it's a 6-point game with 2.5 minutes to go. It's a 4-point game with 1.5 minutes to go. And instead of giving the best player on the floor the basketball, Steph Trimble decides, I'm going to be the hero, and takes 2 god-awful contested shots that he had no chance of making. And it all gets derailed. It all gets, the comeback pick pretty much makes you feel for naught, because this is not a moral victory program. We are not Wake Forest. We are not NC State. We're not here for moral victories. We're here to win basketball games and win a lot of them. And I was reading through, as I always do, Adam Lucas's rapid reactions from his vantage point, because he's sitting courtside, and he wrote that, well, Carolina couldn't get the ball to Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar in the final seconds. I disagree with that. There was nothing that I thought Cal did differently that took Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar away. And there was one possession where Caleb Wilson's got about as deep as post position as he could have gotten. If Trimble gives him the ball, he's going to turn and score, probably turn and dunk, because he played with such emotion that he was just dunking over people in the second half, and we just don't give him the basketball. So I don't want to hear this, well, teams are taking him away. You can't – look, there are some teams that can take Caleb Wilson away. You haven't seen those teams yet. California and Stanford can't take Caleb Wilson away. So I don't. To me, that's an excuse being made as well. And I think that's what's really frustrating with this, with where we're at. For as bad as they played, if they would have played the last 9 minutes of the game for even the entire second half, they win the ball game. They win the ball game, because these teams don't have the talent to handle what Carolina is throwing at them. And I don't understand the lack of urgency. I don't understand where it came from, where it started, because this group didn't have that before the holiday break. They did not. They didn't play at a high level, but it was never from a lack of effort. It was just not making shots, whatever. Now it's an effort thing. Now it's a competitive thing. And that's to me, especially at the collegiate level, that's a reflection of your head coach. And for the 4th time in 5 years, I'm sitting here questioning if the team that I love, the team that I spend my whole entire life around, whether it's writing about, talking about, spending my day or trying to figure out how I'm going to watch the game between all the stuff I got to do as an adult, I'm now got to watch to see, do they actually want to play basketball? Do they actually care? And that's not acceptable. That's not what the expectation is. And now they're going to come back home to play a pretty bad Notre Dame team. And I'm really interested to see what the response is going to be. I mean, this team could get booed. Hubert Davis could be booed. And I don't think I could be upset with Carolina fans, because at 14-4, you could say we're overreacting, but you're 2-3 in this league. And this is the easy part of the schedule. This was the part of the schedule where we said, hey, you got to stack wins, because this league is better. This league is deeper. And right now they're sitting here at 2-3, and it appears that they're headed towards the bubble, and it appears that a head coach at the end of the season on the hot seat. The remaining 13, 14 games of the regular season are going to be spent evaluating if he's the right man to lead this program.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be on the bubble. I mean, the good news is that it looks like Kentucky and Kansas, it looks like they're going to be good enough to keep those as quad one wins. But I mean, for Carolina, this is once again another season that's heading in the wrong direction. You're going to have losses. Now, the good news is that the ACC isn't as bad as it's been in years past. So you're not suffering quad 4 and quad 3 losses. I mean, the loss yesterday was another quad 1 game, but do you have confidence that's going to remain a quad 1 game the rest of the season? I don't think Cal's all that great. Like from what you saw yesterday, I mean, the fact that Cal let you back into the game really shows they're not that great of a basketball team. If they were, they would have put you away and you wouldn't have had to worry about any sort of comeback. So you're right. This is the part of the schedule where you really felt like you were going to beat up on some of these opponents, and Carolina was going to be able to get out to a really good conference start. We were envisioning a start similar to a couple of years ago from Carolina when they won the ACC regular season, where they just raced out to an 8 or 9-0 start. And we thought, okay, we're set up for a similar type of thing this year. Or even if they do suffer maybe one loss somewhere in there, they're going to be able to bounce back. That's what's crazy to me, is that as you said, now we've gotten to the point where we question what is the effort level going to be from this team every time they step on the floor. And I cannot believe we're there, because even with some of the teams that we've had in years past, I don't know how many times we've really questioned the effort to the level that we're questioning this effort, because it really starts on the defensive end of the floor. We have not seen a team this bad defensively, probably on our entire lifetime watching Carolina basketball. So, I mean, look, that it's not like we have seen a ton of really poor defenses, but this group, I mean, they simply have no answers. The fact that Hubert Davis said that the 2-3 zone was effective, that's one of the dumbest comments I've ever heard come out of a head coach's mouth that's been on this campus. And that really says something, because I've heard some really stupid things that have came from over at the Keenan Football Center. It was just stunning. I mean, it's just that you really looked at that 2-3 zone and said to yourself, that was effective? Really? Because they were carving that 2-3 zone up. They were begging you to stay in the 2-3 zone. You know when things really changed? When you went to the 1-2-2 trap. That was where things changed. So I don't know if he got it confused. I don't know what happened. But if you thought that 2-3 zone was effective, there were way too many open looks that they got from the outside. Guys just not communicating the way that they need to. And we've talked about that with what they do normally on the defensive end of the floor. That was just a poor all-around effort again. And it's just mind-blowing to me that he would have a quote like that suggests that end of the floor, there was anything that was good outside of that 1-2-2 trap. So,
well, the worst part is that wasn't even the dumbest thing he said. The press conference opens up. I went back and watched it this morning. It starts with Andrew Jones asking about the pressure, getting Carolina back into the game. Mm-hmm. And if that will be something that they will use moving forward. He said, respectfully, I'll disagree with you. We've been doing it all year long. No, you haven't. No. What? I have, this team has played 17 games. I have watched 17 games. I have watched some of them in person. I've watched some of them on my television screen. Quite simply, no, you have not. And if you feel like you have, problem. Because you haven't pressed nowhere near to the level that I have sat on this podcast and bitched about you not pressing enough. This is no longer complaining. This is no longer venting. No, I'm in bitch mode. For the rest of the year, when this team does not play to the standard that I expect them to play in, I'm going to complain. And I'm going to be complaining quite a bit, because this team is screwed. This team is cooked. But I'm sick and tired of having him argue with our colleagues, man. Like we get the opportunity to watch these games from a media perspective. We get a chance to be in these press conferences. We get a chance to be available to interview these players. And I'm tired of the players saying one thing that's actually factual, something correct. These guys take it to the head coach, and then he argues with them and disagrees with them or argues with the reporter. It was Shelby Swanson after the Stanford loss. Now it's Andrew Jones after the California loss, which probably is the clearest indication that he's in over his head and he's overwhelmed. And he knows it, and he feels it, and he ultimately knows there's nothing that he can do. Because if we're being honest, he can sit up there and talk about how he's not on Facebook, he's not on Twitter, so on and so forth. He knows he's lost his fan base. He knows it. It's evident when you go to games and he gets introduced, there's not even really an applause. There's nothing like when Roy Williams got introduced, and dude, to the back half of Roy's career, when we started really going to games, that was when Carolina fans were wanting to run him out of town, but there was still a pretty big ovation for the head coach. There's nothing for Hubert. And it's hard to think about that when you go to a national title game in year one. You've got the two biggest wins in the history of the greatest rivalry in sports, maybe, to your ledger. You've won an ACC regular season championship, but that's just the reality of the situation, man. Like, Carolina fans are done. Carolina fans are fed up because, quite simply, we shouldn't be losing games to Cal, Stanford, and SMU, man. We're North Carolina. And this is now, the problem is that it's not a hiccup. It's not a blip on the radar. This is a every year occurrence under him outside of one. And that 1 year, you didn't even maximize your seed potential as a 1 seed. You got beat in the Sweet 16. So it was another wild, I like to call it a performance from him in his press conference. And we still got to play the quote of the game. But when he said that, I just looked there dazed and confused for the next 8 minutes watching him try to answer questions, because what he is saying is not factual. And that's not a good place to be if you're the head coach of a program like Carolina, where everything you say, everything you do is going to be watched, and it's going to be mimicked, and it's going to be scrutinized. Like when he gets behind that coach's interview tomorrow, everything he says for that hour at top of the hill is going to be examined. And it should be. And I'm glad we have people in the media like Shelby Swanson that are there to hold him accountable. Let's get into the game, get back into the game, if you will, and take a look at the box score. I'll put it for you guys watching back at home. Cal shoots 50% from the field. They were 29-58. Carolina shoots 46%. They were 26-56. That was after they shot 50% in the first half and trailed by 17 points. 3-point shooting, as we mentioned, favor of Cal. 14 of 26 from the Golden Bears. Carolina just 9 of 27 from 3. Free throw shooting, a big difference in the game. Cal just 12 of 16 from the foul line, and they even missed some late that kept Carolina in the game, if you will. But the Heels go 17 of 28 from the foul line in the middle 20 minutes of the ball game. So from the 10-minute mark of the first half to the 10-minute mark of the second half, this team shot 5 of 13 from the foul line. Can't win games on the road. You can't win games at home even in conference play, leaving that many points at the charity stripe. Carolina forced 13 turnovers and scored 18 points off of them. They committed 11 turnovers, which Cal scored 16 points off of those. Rebounding, dead even on the glass. It was 34 even. We got out-rebounded on the defensive glass 26-24. We out-rebounded them on the offensive glass 10-8. The second chance points, 18 second chance points for Cal. We only got 10. And a lot of them came in the first 4 minutes of the game where Lee Dort just quite simply went and got the ball, and California scored second chance points off of them. Bench points. Carolina actually got a productive night from the bench. You get 21-13 in favor of Carolina. Points in the paint in favor of Carolina, 32-18. Fast break points in favor of Carolina, 10-8. Blocks in favor of Carolina, 4-1. Steals in favor of Carolina, 10-6. The assists, Carolina had 16 assists on 20 made baskets. California had 20 assists on their 29 made baskets. And California led for a whopping 39 minutes and 20 seconds. We've referenced a lot of quotes from Hubert Davis's press conference, but now let's actually get to his quote of the game, where he talked about this is just a bump on the road right now for him and his basketball team.
The year, middle of the year, you hope it's not at the end of the year, and you have to find a way to work through it. And so these are some bumps that we went through this week in 3 of the last 4 games. And we're going to have to respond and fight back. We have an opportunity to do this. I love these kids. We've got an unbelievable, great team to coach. I love being around them, and we'll figure it out.
Hey, man, I love these kids too. They play the sport that I love at a university that I love. I'm tired. I don't care if you love these kids. I care if you're going to coach them. I care if you're going to maximize them. You got a $14 million roster sitting on that bench. And look, those people that criticize that $14 million back in the summer, you had every right to criticize it. Cannot argue against that right now. There's absolutely no trust, no faith that this is going to be corrected. I think Carolina will beat the teams they're supposed to beat at home. I think they'll beat, Notre Dame on Wednesday. I think they'll beat some of the other lower level teams that have to come to the Smith Center. But these were 2 games that you were expected to win. And look, I know only Duke and Wake Forest have gone undefeated in the West Coast road trip in the 2 years this has been a part of conference play. But you shouldn't be going 0-2. And so, he talks about there not being a sense of urgency from his players on the court. Where's the sense of urgency in your press conference? Where is your sense of urgency when you're addressing the media? Because let me tell you something right now. If this would have happened under Roy Williams, first off, he wouldn't have, even if he would have argued with Andrew Jones, he'd earned the right to, because he won 3 national titles, 900 games with the 9 Final Fours. He could do that. But there would have been a sense of urgency that, good Dickens, we're going to figure this crap out. We're going to get back home. We're going to watch the film. We're going to do every defensive drill that they hate, so on and so forth. And you would expect a different energy, effort, attitude when the team takes the floor the next time they play. Do we truly believe that's going to happen? Do we truly believe that when they get back to Chapel Hill, I'd imagine they got back, maybe they flew back last night, maybe they decided today to fly back. Do we really think he put them through the ringer? Do we really think that he's grilling them in film? Do we really think that he's running them? And yes, you can run kids in 2026 when they don't play hard. You can punish them by lining them up on the end line and running them until they throw up. You can do that. Do we think that's happening? Do we think where he's putting them in a stance and making them guard for 2 hours, not even touching the basketball? Because I don't think that's happening. And until that happens, until he grows a spine, until he shows urgency, then his team's not going to show urgency. Your team takes on your attitude. They take on the energy that you create, the environment that you create. This is a consequence of the environment he creates because he has not learned in 5 years as a head coach and 9 years as an assistant how to walk the line of Roy Williams was a player coach, but he still knew how to hold his players accountable and challenge them and bring out the most in him. We've got 5 years of data and a lot of bullcrap losses that suggest Hubert Davis hasn't figured that part of it out yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about yesterday, one of the lowest energy games that we've ever seen from him on the sideline. I mean, he did not really do anything for most of the day. He was just walking back and forth. There was no glasses off. It was just him standing there for most of the time. And yeah, Roy Williams would do similar stuff when, Carolina would get down big in games as well. But again, Roy Williams earned the right to do that because of all the success that he had. And there were still moments where he would coach his team and be, animated, especially when it got back to being a close game. Never felt like he got that from Hubert Davis yesterday. It just felt like, again, he's gotten to this point, and we felt this just about every one of these seasons, outside of that 23-24 regular season, where you would get to a point where he just kind of gives up on his team. And it becomes very obvious that he's giving up on his team. And he's, I think this year, You got to wonder whether or not this is the time where that actually happens. You know, you said that you're comfortable with thinking they're going to beat everybody that they're supposed to at home. I mean, I hope so. I really hope that's going to be the case, but I don't think any of those games are going to be easy. And when we started this season, I'm not saying I expected all these games to be easy. I didn't expect Carolina to absolutely blow everybody out that they played. But you felt like there were going to be some games in conference play that you just didn't necessarily have to worry about. I mean, California, dude, that's a team that's going to finish near the bottom of the ACC, and they just beat you. So it's hard for me to feel overly confident that this team is going to be able to win the games that they are supposed to even the rest of the season. And if you lose one of those games that's really bad, you do wonder how many teams are they actually putting in the tournament from the ACC this year. We don't know, but I'm going to tell you they're not going to put as many as they put in from the SEC last year. They're not going to put in as many as they're going to probably put in from the Big 12 this year. So Carolina has to make sure that they take care of those games at home. In terms of what you said about will we see a new energy around this team, I don't trust that at all. There is nothing that has shown us that you should believe this team is going to come out and all of a sudden be re-energized. They're going to, defend at an incredibly high rate on that end of the floor. I hope they do. I hope that we do see more trapping. I hope that we see just a better defensive effort like we saw in that second half, and that all of a sudden Carolina really is able to find their stride on that end of the floor and hold a team to, 60 something points in a game or something like that. Maybe they do that against Notre Dame. But the thing is the next time that you go on the road, are you going to be able to do that? Is there really going to be a culture change with this group? Because that's what it feels like this group needs right now. And that's unbelievable to think that we are at that point. Because and I know it wasn't a great performance, but after that Kentucky game, you felt so good about where Carolina was at. You said, you know what? The injury to Seth Trimble was a big part of the reason why Carolina was where they were at, against Michigan State. You would figure that, with him being back in the lineup, Carolina would get better. But again, you go back to that game in Atlanta against Ohio State, and it really feels like that's where things started to turn. It was a closer game than Carolina was expecting. They ended up having to have a little luck to survive that one at the end, and they were able to make the plays that they needed to down the stretch. Since that moment, when's the last time Carolina's made plays down the stretch of a game to be able to actually win the game? I guess you could say against Wake Forest they made some free throws, but even that wasn't easy. So, I mean, you've got to get back to being able to execute, especially late in games. And the thing about, they were doing a good job of denying Caleb the basketball and Henry the basketball. Well, you got to get more creative. I mean, damn, that's on the head coach of getting more creative to get your best players the ball. I mean, damn it, when we see teams in the NBA that are great defensive teams, and yet they still find a way to get the ball in the hands of their best player. Even in college basketball, there are teams that have really great players that just find a way to get the basketball into their hands. You've got to find a way to be able to do that late in games because you need Caleb Wilson to be that star. And he's capable of doing that. We've seen that he's able to carry this team at certain points. And same thing with Henry. If you're telling me that they're somehow taking away both guys easily, well, then what are you trying to tell me? You're telling me that those players aren't doing the things they need to be able to establish themselves and get position on that end of the floor, because there's no way they're doubling both players. It just doesn't work like that. So these quotes, some of these thoughts even that are coming out from around the program, I mean, it feels like excuse making at times, when really what it is that this group doesn't seem like they are tough enough to be able to make plays down the stretch. They don't seem to be smart enough to get the ball in the hands of their best player when they need to down the stretch. And this is, what's amazing is this isn't the last or the first time that we're talking about this. We talk about this, it feels like every year under Hubert Davis. So, I mean, they've got to figure something out here. Notre Dame is a team that you should be able to beat, but at this point, nothing is guaranteed with this squad. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, when it comes to not being able to get, Wilson the ball, Vasar the ball, part of it, is Hubert Davis got outcoached by Kyle Smith and Mark Madsen this week.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Smith and Mark Madsen. Carolina got beat yesterday by a guy whose name was John Camden, who looks like a future accountant. And this guy was grilling you. Like Day-Day Ames, quality player, good basketball player. Continued the streak of the opponent improving his point per game average against Carolina. But there's just things that are happening that should not happen. And when you watch the way that the team that we compare ourselves the most to, that team 8 miles down the road, how they're overwhelming the same opponents that we can't stop, it really shows a disparity in two things: the talent and the coaching. And look, we're getting a lot of comments about about Seth Trimble, someone that I was very critical of during the loss yesterday. Our guys stay vigilant on YouTube, saying Seth would be a backup on our best title teams. And look, there is something to be said about Carolina's played worse with him back, and I don't think it's fair to him to put all the blame on him. But the proof's in the pudding. The numbers would suggest Carolina was better without him than they were with them. And that was even with Kai Evans being as bad as he was, as bad as he is. And it just none of this makes sense. None of this was even foreseeable when this team was 12-1. But I think what you're seeing is what the fear all along was this is what happens when, for the first 2 months of the year, outside of games that you were basically contracted to play against quality opponents, you did not challenge yourself enough in the non-con. This team was not ready to come into ACC play and take on an improved league. This team was not ready to go on the road and play in these types of environments. And the two games this week, there were just as many, if not more, Carolina fans in the building than there were the Stanford or California fans. But you still weren't ready to play. You still were not ready to go. And that's got to be corrected. That's got to be changed, because if not, then none of this is going to change. Then this is just who Carolina is. This is what Carolina is going to be, and you're legitimately wasting the best statistical freshman season we've ever seen from a player. And Caleb Wilson, continues to do things that you just marvel at. And some people, like my dad, texted that they played better without featuring him in the offense the final 10-19. I don't know how you come to that opinion. I don't know how you get to that. Like, his defense changed the whole entire game. His length impacted the whole entire game. His emotion in the huddle impacted the whole entire game, because the head coach just wasn't sitting there challenging anybody. Who was the one in the huddle yelling at his teammates? It was him. And who was the one that went on the court and backed up that emotion? That was him. And so, look, the late game stuff makes no sense, because Carolina's more gifted than how much they've struggled in late game scenarios. But then again, that to me comes back to a lack of coaching. We go to the stat of the game. This one is mind-boggling. California led, as I mentioned, for 39 minutes and 20 seconds. It's the first time in the history of the program as an ACC school, which I get is, only 2 years or whatever, but it's the first time they've ever led start to finish in a game, in an ACC game. How? We can't lead against California. California can now, get beat by Duke, be 1-4 in ACC play, but can lead from start to finish against North Carolina with a coach that should not be able to coach on the level that Hubert Davis coaches, with players that are not as gifted as the players that you have. That to me was a wild and maddening statistic, and it's very damning on this coaching staff, on this roster and just where this program is at right now. Let's get into some more thoughts, some more takeaways as we're talking through Carolina's 84-78 loss yesterday afternoon to Stanford. Do got to praise the move to put Derek Dixon into the starting lineup. I thought the kid responded. I thought he was tough. I thought he was gritty. Was 5 of 11 from the field. Was 4 of 8 from 3. 3 assists. Did have 2 really bad turnovers. But when you wait this long into the season to make a switch that you probably should have made a month and a half ago, that's going to be part of it. He's gonna mess up as he moves along. But he gave Carolina a lift with some perimeter shooting. That 3 he made in the corner to make it 77-71, as tough a shot as you could have been forced to take in that situation. And the kid's proven twice that he's tough enough to make those shots. So I think, I got to like that, but there's got to be some more maximization of this roster and of this backcourt. Jonathan Powell, who is still your best perimeter shooter and one of your best perimeter defenders, plays 11 minutes, scores 3 points, grabs 3 rebounds, takes 1 shot, only plays 11 minutes. Jaden Young doesn't get the minutes against Stanford, but somehow in this game bounces back and gets awarded 14 minutes, scores 5 points, was 1 of 2 from the field, both shot attempts from behind the 3-point line, did make 2 free throws with the rebound. You did see the limitation of Kyan Evans, who played just 10 total minutes last night. But if I can find it, or if Greg Ward wants to resend it here, he was sending. We were talking about this loss again last night. There's got to be 3 guard lineups that we're rolling with at some point. You need to put more shooting on the floor. You need to put more ball handling on the floor, more speed on the floor, and more perimeter toughness on the floor. So, look, we can sit here and look. The switch was needed. It was necessary. So, kudos to Hubert Davis for making that switch. You still got to maximize really more out of Jonathan Powell moving forward, as in addition to Jaden Young, and optimize more 3-guard lineups moving forward here down the stretch.
Yeah, and Powell's basically a guard, but he's 6'6", so he's also got the size to be able to handle himself on the perimeter against most of the guys that he's going to be matched up against at that 3 spot. So I think he would be fine. I think he's a much better defender than what we're seeing from a guy like Jaren Stevenson. You just look at the plus-minus numbers. That'll tell you everything that you need to know about where Jaren Stevenson is at right now. Carolina, with him on the floor yesterday, was minus 16. So when they went to these guys late in the game, that was part of the reason why they were able to get themselves back into the game. You need to go with a smaller lineup like that, I think, to really accentuate what you've got on this roster. We know that the guards are capable of helping you at this point. You feel pretty good about what Jonathan Powell is going to bring every single time that he's out there on the floor. You feel pretty good about what Jaden Young is going to bring now every time that he's out there on the floor. It's not going to be the best, that we've ever seen from this group. It's not like all of a sudden you're stashing guys on the bench that are going to lead you to a national title, but it's a group that just competes. And that's what we're looking for, are guys that want to come off the bench and actually want to compete. And so I think that you gotta have some lineups that are like that with this group. Put Powell at that 3 spot. I know you like him at that 2 because it gives you a ton of length on the floor. And, there's times where that's going to work too, especially if you want to do a lot of the trapping and stuff like that. Yeah, having a guy that's 6'6" at the 2 guard and then potentially having Jaren Stevenson, who's 6'10" at the 3 spot. Yeah, that could certainly work in certain circumstances. But I think that's something that Carolina has to look at and try to use a little bit more down the stretch. And yeah, Derek Dixon, that's got to be your guy, because as we said, who gives you a better chance, you feel like, to succeed moving forward, even beyond this year? I think it's Derek Dixon. I think Kyan Evans, there's a good chance that Kyan Evans is one and done here. There's a good chance that at the end of the season, he's transferring, he's going somewhere else. So maximize what you've got in Derek Dixon. I'm not saying that he's going to be perfect. There are going to be games where he's not going to really contribute on the offensive end of the floor, and people will probably be frustrated again with the point guard spot. But he's a guy that's going to be here 2-3 years at that point guard spot for you. I think he's got more confidence already in himself, believe it or not, even though he hasn't necessarily played nearly as much. And you saw that yesterday with how he shot it from the outside. There is zero chance Kyan Evans is making that shot that he hit to make it a 6-point game. Zero chance. Not where Kyan Evans is right now. And so I think for that reason alone, that's why you decide to roll with Derek Dixon and just see where it goes from here. I think the team ceiling's a little bit higher with him. But, again, at this point, I don't even know how high the team ceiling is. I think it's way lower than we thought it was, which is, a shock to the system based off of where we were just a couple of weeks ago. But I do think that those lineups going to more 3-guard lineups and sticking with Derek Dixon at point guard is what's going to get you where you ultimately want to go.
I want to talk about the comeback because I do think there's two things that are worth talking about with the way that Carolina played the final 8-24 when they were down 19. They make it a 4-point game. Realistically, you cannot play with that level of pressure over the span of 40 minutes. I get that. I understand that. The effort, though, is the thing. If Carolina plays with effort for 30 minutes yesterday, they win the game. Even with the way that Cal would have shot the ball. Because you showed that in 8 minutes, you were able to kind of overcome a 19-point deficit. And so you got to hope that whatever happened in the final 8-24 is something that's going to carry over and that they found something. They found something. They found a toughness. They found an edge. Maybe something was finally said in that huddle, in the, that connected, because we've seen Carolina play with that edge before. We can look at the defensive numbers from non-conference play, and yes, they played some really sorry basketball teams. Central Arkansas, ECU, North Carolina Central. Those teams are terrible, and I get that. But their poor shooting nights were because Carolina was impacting it. Hubert Davis has said during this run, whenever you're allowing teams to shoot the way the teams are shooting in ACC play, teams are shooting 53% from the field, 50% from 3 against Carolina. He says that you're helping them. Well, when you force teams into bad shooting nights, it's because you're impacting their shot selection, you're impacting their confidence, so on and so forth. You've got to hope that they found something in the final 8.5 minutes or so. But it's evidence of something that I have really talked about and complained about for the last 3 years. That when this team presses and this team extends their defense and they pick up their pressure and they trap and they double team, they play better. There's a different energy with them. There's a different you get the game being played at your pace, at your speed. Reminder, we're playing the slowest tempo since the Bill Guthridge era. And this is a head coach that talks about wanting to be the fastest team in the country from foul line to foul line. Well, you get the tempo you want when you extend your defense, when you press, when you run and jump, when you do all those things that you actually coach very well. You actually teach very well. And so I think that's going to be something I'm going to be mindful of on Wednesday night when I'm in the arena watching the game. Does he put his foot on the gas? Does he – because we're always reacting to what the opponent is doing. We're never the aggressor. We're never the team that's looking to bury you. We're always reacting what the other team is doing. Does he come out and does he pick up full court? Does he extend the defense? Does he press more? Does he run and jump more? Does he trap more ball screens than what he's done so far this season? But that's got to be like the one thing that you take from. Is because if this is truly just a bump in the road and this was just a bad 2 weeks, then the final 8 minutes could be something that saved their season. No, you didn't come back and won the game, but you may have found something that you could build off of moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just starts with bringing that same energy, because during that stretch, that was the best energy that we have seen from this group, the best effort that we have seen from this group since, they went through this stretch. I mean, really, you go back to some of the halves that Carolina has played here recently, even in some of the halves where Carolina wasn't necessarily terrible, like that first half against Wake Forest, they still weren't great on that end of the floor. It still lacked energy at times. It still lacked that effort that you needed to see on the defensive end of the floor. And so I think that's hopefully what you're praying you found in this game the other night, or in this game last night, was that this team finally said to itself, okay, this is the level of effort that we need to play with. And this is the level of intensity that we need to play with. Mainly, I mean, look, they need to put pressure on the ball. That's one of the things that we've been saying. It doesn't feel like they are necessarily doing that. Things just feel really easy. Guys are able to get to wherever they want to get to on the floor. Any sort of pass that they want, it's available to them. You're not creating the turnovers. And that's one of the things, we didn't talk about it a lot during non-conference play, but I think now it's starting to show. The fact that this team just cannot create turnovers for themselves, really, you have to wait for the opponent to hand them to you. That's part of the reason why they aren't that good, because they're not pressuring the ball the way that they need to. They haven't been doing it really all season. We just didn't notice it as much in the non-conference because you had some pretty bad teams that you were playing against. Now you've got to be able to create those turnovers. And we saw in that second half against Cal, that's what you were able to do in those final 10 minutes. That full court press really changed everything. And you're right, you can't run it at all times, but can you run it in strategic moments for Carolina? And when I say strategic moments, I don't mean like we've seen them do at times this year. We'll throw it out once during a sequence and then, we're back into our normal defense and that's it. It worked or it didn't work, even if it doesn't work, and we'll go away from it. They did it against Stanford. They ran it one time. It didn't work. A Corey finished with a lay-in, and all of a sudden they said, well, Hubert said we can't do that the rest of the night. We can't, it's not going to work. You can't go away from it that easy, man. I think you've got to stick with it. So can you go through some of these stretches where, first half of the game, okay, Carolina, maybe they're even leading at some point. You decide, you know what? Let's throw this trap out there for the next 3-4 possessions, sort of something like that. And let's see if that really changes what they're doing. Really just try to speed them up and make them, commit some of these errors that are going to give you the basketball and allow you to speed the game up yourself and play at the pace that you want to play at. Because there is one thing. He is right that this is a team that succeeds when they play fast. It's just you have not had success of being able to speed teams up the way that you want to, nearly at the rate that you should. So I think that should be something that Carolina should be trying to do. They should be trying to play a much faster game. It's just they can't do it because they're not forcing these turnovers that lead to some of those odd man breaks that Carolina should be seeing more often.
Look, forcing turnovers does it impact pace of play? Absolutely. And look, Hubert always says he only uses stats to confirm something he believes in. The stats prove that when Carolina turns people over, they score points off of them. They had 13 turnovers forced yesterday. They scored 18 points off of them. Pace is also coached. Do you want to play fast? Because guess what? If you want to play fast, whenever an opponent makes a bucket, you don't walk the ball up the court. What does Carolina do when we give up a basket? We walk the ball up the court. We're not crossing the timeline until 22, 23 seconds. When you off of misses, yes, do you ideally want the ball to get into your point guard's hands? Absolutely. Hubert says we play positionless basketball. You want a bunch of ball handlers on the floor. If that means that there's a guard that's 3/4 of the way up, you go ahead and you push the ball up the court because the ball doesn't have to be in Dixon's hands or Kine Evans' hands or whoever it was, but you're advancing the ball up the court. There's other ways that we could play fast that could be coached. It's not coached. It's not taught, because I don't think, quite simply, he wants to play that way. Because the coach he played for did not play as fast as a pace as Roy Williams did. And that's okay. That's what made Dean Smith and Roy Williams a little bit different. I mean, under Roy Williams, Carolina was going to run because he built a roster that was equipped to run. And that's what's so frustrating about this roster is you've got a bunch of guards and wings that thrive in the open court. Like, and for as lack of a handle as Caleb Wilson has, when he gets downhill, you're not stopping him because he's so damn long that it all it takes is 2 dribbles and he's at the front of the rim. And he's either dunking, laying it up, getting fouled, or doing all 3. And so I'm tired of it all just being player blamed. Like, no. They play the way that you coached them to play. And if they're not playing the way you're coaching them, why are you playing them? Which comes back to the lack of accountability, which is probably going to be the biggest undoing, is that for 4 out of 5 years, by the middle part of the season, it's January 18th, and we don't have a defined rotation. It's not defined. We're still searching for significant, impactful players at the 1 and at the 3 spot on a consistent basis. For the most part, you know what you're getting from your 2, from your 4, and from your 5. But it's the same 3-on-3, the same Olympic basketball that we trotted out the other year in Paris. This is 5-on-5. You've got to have 5 guys playing at a high level. You got to have 5 guys that are in sync when they're on the floor together. Which brings us to, I guess, the discussion and the talking point. Because, I was seeing some of the comments from Seth Trimble that, he's doing what a leader is supposed to do and saying, look, there's not a beef in the locker room. There's nothing going on extracurricular that has led to this downward trajectory of play for the last 2 weeks. Well, then why does this look and feel and appear to be broken beyond repair? Because I got a lot of feedback from a lot of Carolina fans after I tweeted on after the Stanford loss that Carolina looks broken. Well, it's just 1 loss. How can you say they're broken? What did they not feel broken yesterday when they gave up 54 points in a half? When they gave up 10 3-pointers made in a half? When they got outscored by 17 in the first half while shooting 50% from the field? Like, did it not look and feel like they were hopeless, that they had absolutely nothing to offer? Because, when you went through the bad 2023 season, well, guess what? Your 2 best players, if you will, hated each other. And they shared a backcourt together. Ain't gonna win a whole lot of basketball games if those 2 guys don't get along. Last year, it was part of it was poor roster construction, but you had 2 guys in Elliot Cadeau and Ian Jackson that had some of the worst attitudes I've ever seen a Carolina basketball player display in my 15-plus years watching the program. So if Seth is so adamant that there's nothing wrong, then that Hubert Davis loves this team and they're a close-knit team and they all get along very well, then how do you explain what's happened? Because maybe he is right that this is truly just a bump in the road and this is a long-ass season and this is going to get corrected. But I don't think that's what anyone is feeling from a local perspective or from a national perspective, because the Eye on College Basketball, Field of 68, the national media, they're starting to talk about Carolina, and they're not out here saying, hey, it's just a 2-week dip. They're going to figure this out. They're all doing the same thing we're doing. We're sounding the alarm on the season. We're sounding the alarm on the head coach. We're sounding the alarm on everything because Carolina basketball appears to be broken once again.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the coaching. I think that's really the main thing that you're looking at is the reason why they are here is because they are just a poorly coached team. I mean, it does not seem like they adjust to the things that they need to adjust to on the floor when, they're struggling in certain areas. I mean, it just seems like just the breakdowns that we saw from Terrence Oglesby on what they were doing wrong on the defensive end of the floor. Those are things that Hubert Davis should be telling these guys, and they should be adjusting. Henry Vasar should not be nearly as far back in the paint as he is on a lot of these plays. I mean, there shouldn't be the drop coverage that he's playing because it's not working. It hasn't been successful for the majority of the start of conference play. Well, that's something that you got to get ironed out. It's the same thing when it comes to Caleb Wilson, ball watching a lot on the offensive or on the defensive end of the floor. You've got to get that out of him. You got to find a way to change the way that's working, but it just doesn't feel like Hubert Davis is coaching that out of these guys. And so I think that's really the main reason why they are where they're at, because the only other reason that you could come up with as to why Carolina is struggling the way that they're struggling is that they simply aren't talented enough. And I don't know if that's the case. Maybe it really is. Maybe we thought some of these guys were better than they actually turned out to be. But I find it hard to believe that this team isn't that talented, especially, with Caleb Wilson, with Henry Vasar. These guys are talented. They just need to be coached the right way. But it is possible that is one of the reasons why Carolina is where it's at, especially with the backcourt and the wing players that they have outside of Caleb Wilson. It's just that they simply don't have the talent that they thought they were going to have. They thought some guys were going to be able to break out and really have big seasons. I mean, we thought Luka Bogovac was going to be a lot better than we've seen so far. And even if it is on the talent that Carolina has, you go back and it's really Hubert Davis's talent evaluation. He put together this roster. Him and Jim Tanner put together this roster. And so I think if it really comes down to that, you have to sit down and point the finger at yourself, because you were the guys that assembled this group together. You were the ones that went out and got a Kyan Evans and thought that he was going to be successful. You were the ones that went out and got a Luka Bogovac from overseas. Really, what we thought was a huge addition at the time, and it hasn't necessarily worked out. That's one where maybe you're willing to forgive them a little bit more, because you look at 8 miles down the road, the guy they went and got who everybody thought was going to be great from overseas, Dame Sarr, he hasn't been good either. So maybe that's just the thing where going and getting some of these international players is not going to lead to a lot of success, and maybe that's something that they'll realize moving forward. But I do think that a lot of it comes back to this team just being poorly coached, this team, not being put in the positions that they need to be able to succeed in a lot of these games. And until, something changes with that, which would mean that you end up moving on from the head coach, I don't think that this team is really going to look all that much different as we go throughout the rest of conference play.
To make matters worse, and this is something we'll be covering on the website a little bit later, Dylan Mingo, announced that he was supposed to make his decision this upcoming week. There was some reporting that he has now pushed back that potential decision. Regardless, 24/7 Sports has crystal balled the 5-star point guard to go to Baylor. So one of the top targets for Carolina in the upcoming recruiting class. They're no longer favored to land. And about 3 weeks ago, when there was intel coming out about his recruitment, guess where he was thinking about going more so than any place? It was Carolina, which tells you that he's looking at what's happening. He sees the gauge of where the team is at, where the program is at, where the fan base is at, and he's probably going to play basketball somewhere else. Quite simply because he knows if he comes to play for Carolina. And, we could sit here and we can speculate about Hubert Davis's job all we want. And good God Almighty, we're going to. There's not a guarantee that Carolina moves on from him. But, which means that why would Mingo want to come play here? When you're looking at Caleb Wilson, who has, averaging basically 20 and 10, and the team's underachieving in conference play. So, we got to wait and see how that official, the announcement does come down, but it just goes from bad to worse for Carolina. And look, we talked about it last week when we were getting ready to talk about the West Coast road trip. And I told you, I said, I think this trip sets the tone for the rest of the season. We were hoping for 2-0, would have probably accepted 1-1 just because of how hard it's been for teams to go out there and win both. Never thought 0-2 was on the table. this team goes 0-2. They can talk about continuity all they want. They appear broken. Your head coach appears lost on the sidelines and press conferences. And it appears that this season is heading towards a tailspin. And a head coach that entered the year on the hot seat is now going to spend we've played the next 13 games coaching for his job. And they're probably going to play the next 13 games playing for the right to play in the NCAA tournament, because they're no longer playing for tournament seeding. They're no longer playing for tournament positioning like they should have been entering ACC play. They're 29th in the net. They actually moved up a spot after the loss, but you're 3-4 in quad one. Now you've got more quad one wins than you had last year, which would suggest you may not be as firmly on the bubble, but you're probably going to be playing yourself into a seed where you should not be playing at with a guy like Caleb Wilson on your roster. With that, that's going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, guys, we will direct you guys to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, where we had you covered with the California game. Preview, recap is up on the website. I put it up for you guys this morning. You can go and check that out if you so want to. Of course, we'll have you covered with the Notre Dame game later in the week and that Dylan Mingo announcement, which, could be made official as early as Thursday as we continue to take you through the basketball season. Same thing on the football side of things. It does appear that, the portal has come to a close. It does appear that Carolina is pretty much done adding to the portal. But if any news comes out of that, Anthony will have you covered. We had you covered all offseason long with the players that Carolina has added from the portal and the players that Carolina has lost to the portal. And believe it or not, before you know it, we will be getting you ready for the start of spring practice, which is just a little bit over a month and a half away. So be on the lookout for all that great football coverage, even though we are in the heart of basketball season. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. You can just search the Four Corners Podcast, and that's where we'll pop up there. We encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the season. If you're a video consumer of the podcast, the best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog. We're still trying to get to 700 subscribers by the end of the month. Or you can follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second that we go live, you will get a notification set to your mobile device. You can then jump in and be a part of our conversation talking Carolina basketball. With that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.